Before red carpets, they worked in back rooms. Before fame made them icons, survival made them hustlers. These stars built Hollywood legends out of lives the studios tried to erase. Clara Bow's Brooklyn Survival. The future It Girl didn't start with lights or fame. She started in a one-room Brooklyn apartment with walls so thin you could hear her neighbors argue. Clara Bow was born in 1905 to a father who drifted between jobs and a mother who battled severe mental illness. By her teens, she was the one keeping both of them alive. Brooklyn in the 1910s wasn't kind to poor girls. Streets were crowded with factories, sweatshops, and speakeasies hidden behind corner stores. Clara was often seen running errands for neighbors to earn pennies. When her mother was institutionalized, she learned to survive alone. She stayed with friends, helped at small theaters, and did odd jobs that paid just enough for food. The local papers later called her the girl from nowhere. That wasn't wrong. She had no formal schooling, no support, and no plan except getting out. In interviews years later, she described sleeping in hallways and eating scraps from diner plates. "I was just trying to keep breathing," she said once. Everything changed when she entered a 1921 motion picture magazine contest. The prize was a Hollywood screen test. She almost missed the deadline because she couldn't afford proper photos. A friend who worked at a department store helped her sneak in after hours to take pictures against a curtain. Those photos got her noticed. The studio executives weren't sure what to do with her. She had a thick Brooklyn accent and raw energy that didn't match the polished silent stars of the time, but audiences saw something electric in her face. She won the contest, got a one-line part in Beyond the Rainbow, 1922, and left New York with a train ticket she could barely afford. In California, she started at the bottom again. The film was lost, her role was cut, and her contract almost didn't renew. She borrowed clothes from other extras and worked late cleaning sets. But by 1927, she became Paramount's biggest name, the face of It. The studios sold her as the perfect flapper, carefree and glamorous. Few knew she'd once begged for meals and slept in cold stairwells. Hollywood liked the myth better than the truth. Clara just kept quiet and smiled for the cameras. Mae West's burlesque beginnings. Before Hollywood learned to censor her, Mae West was already writing the rules. Born in Brooklyn in 1893, she grew up surrounded by vaudeville performers, hustlers, and theater workers who knew survival better than glamour. Her mother pushed her onto stage contests at 7. By her teens, she was performing in burlesque houses where applause came with smoke, liquor, and money on the floor. Those early clubs weren't glamorous Broadway stages. They were small, dim rooms filled with working men, and the women who danced often doubled as companions after hours. The line between entertainment and sex work blurred easily in that world. Mae didn't hide from it. She studied it. She knew what men wanted and how women used that attention to make rent. By 1918, she was performing in Vaudeville with Bite. Her routines used winks, pauses, and lines that pushed past the limits of polite theater. Censors hated her. Audiences loved her. She once said, "When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better." That line was marketing genius born from experience in the back rooms of New York's risque nightlife. The managers who hired her knew she brought in business. Some paid extra for private parties and appearances that blurred into escort-style performances. Nothing was documented directly, but biographers note how she learned to control male attention without letting it control her. In that era, women performers were often treated as property. Mae made herself the boss instead. In the 1920s, she wrote and produced her own stage play, Sex. It was exactly what the title suggested, a satire of double standards and moral hypocrisy. Police raided the show in 1927, arrested her, and sentenced her to 10 days in jail for corrupting public morals. She served 8 for good behavior and left in a limousine. That arrest made her famous. Reporters called her the girl who went to jail for art. She called it great publicity. Soon Hollywood came calling. Studios wanted her danger, not her innocence. Barbara Payton's Hollywood decline. Her story reads like a caution sign the studios ignored. Born in Minnesota in 1927, she grew up restless and ambitious. By her early 20s, she was in Los Angeles, chasing movie work with the kind of confidence that turned heads. Her big break came in Kiss Tomorrow, Goodbye, 1950, opposite James Cagney. Critics liked her screen presence. The studios liked her looks even more. Publicists called her Hollywood's blonde wildfire. She went to parties, charmed producers, and lived fast. That pace came with consequences. She fell for Franchot Tone, a respected actor twice her age, while also seeing Tom Neal, a rough-edged co-star from Detour. When the two men met at her apartment in 1951, the night ended with Tone hospitalized and Neal arrested for assault. Newspapers turned the scandal into daily entertainment. The fallout was immediate. Studio executives stopped taking her calls. She lost contracts and struggled to find work. By 1953, she was accepting minor parts in low-budget pictures just to stay visible. Soon, even those offers dried up. Her decline was brutal and public. Police blotters listed her name again and again through the 1950s for intoxication and solicitation. Reporters described her as once luminous, now faded. She rarely denied it. In her 1963 autobiography, I Am Not Ashamed, she admitted to turning to sex work to survive, writing simply, "I needed money. I had to eat." Those words stripped away Hollywood's polite fictions. Barbara wasn't looking for sympathy, only honesty. She'd been built into a symbol of desire, then abandoned when she lived outside the script. Friends remembered her walking Sunset Boulevard in worn clothes, still greeting strangers with a smile. By the late 1960s, her health collapsed under alcohol and exhaustion. In 1967, she died alone in a cheap Los Angeles apartment at 39. The coroner listed heart and liver failure. A small service followed, mostly attended by those who remembered her kindness, not her scandals. Shelley Winters' taxi dance hustle. Before the awards, before the fame, Shelley Winters was just a girl paying rent one song at a time. Born Shirley Shrift in St. Louis in 1920, she grew up during the Depression and learned early that ambition didn't pay bills. By her teens, she was living in New York, picking up whatever work she could find. One of those jobs was as a taxi dancer. Taxi dance halls were smoky, crowded rooms where men bought tickets to dance with women for a few minutes. The women earned a cut of each ticket. It wasn't illegal, but it wasn't exactly safe either. Winters later joked that she learned more about psychology there than any acting class could teach. "Men will tell you everything if you just listen," she once said. Some expected more than dancing, and Winters knew how to set boundaries while still earning enough to survive. Those long nights taught her confidence and timing. She'd watch how people flirted, lied, and sold versions of themselves. It became her unofficial acting school. The realism that later defined her screen roles, especially in A Place in the Sun, 1951, and The Diary of Anne Frank, 1959, was born in those halls. Her first break came when she joined the Federal Theater Project, a government program helping struggling performers. From there, she moved to Hollywood, where her strong voice and fearless attitude stood out. She wasn't the conventional beauty the studios wanted, but she was unforgettable, directors noticed. In interviews, she spoke openly about her hustling years. She never painted them as glamorous or shameful, just practical. When asked about that part of her life, she said, "You do what you have to until you can do what you want." It was one of her favorite lines, and she lived it. By the mid-1950s, Shelley had won her first Oscar and was known for stealing scenes from bigger stars. She kept her humor sharp and her empathy sharper. That mix came from real life, not studio polish. Xaviera Hollander's high-class escort empire. She didn't stumble into fame by accident. She built it. Born in Suriname in 1943 and raised in Amsterdam, she grew up fluent in 5 languages and fearless about money. After moving to New York in the mid-1960s, she took a job at the Dutch consulate. It paid well, but not enough to satisfy her curiosity about the city's nightlife or its hidden economy. By 1968, she'd left diplomacy for a far more profitable career. Hollander became one of Manhattan's most successful escorts, catering to politicians, businessmen, and entertainment insiders. Within a year, she was running her own high-end call girl operation known among her clients as Madam X. She didn't hide it. She organized schedules, paid taxes, and treated her business like any other form of management. The press found her fascinating. Reporters expected shame or secrecy, but Hollander spoke about her work with open confidence. She said, "I made love for money, and I made money for love." That honesty shocked New York society. When police finally arrested her in 1971 for promoting prostitution, she spent only a few days in jail. She later joked that the publicity was worth more than the fine. Soon after, she co-wrote The Happy Hooker, My Own Story with journalist Robin Moore. The book became an international bestseller, selling millions of copies and sparking public debates about sex work, hypocrisy, and morality. Hollywood adapted it into a film in 1975, and Xaviera became a celebrity in her own right, something unheard of for a woman with her background. Critics called her story scandalous. Feminists argued over whether she represented empowerment or exploitation. Hollander didn't care about either label. She described herself as a businesswoman who saw opportunity where others saw taboo. Her interviews on late-night television made her both controversial and charismatic. Unlike many before her, she controlled her own narrative. There were no studio handlers or publicists shaping her image. She sold the truth as she saw it and profited from it. In later years, she ran a bed and breakfast in Amsterdam and wrote columns about relationships and sexuality. Linda Lovelace's forced exploitation. She was 21 when she became Linda Lovelace, a name she would spend the rest of her life trying to escape. Born in the Bronx in 1949, she was raised in a strict Catholic home and sent to parochial school. Her life changed after she met Chuck Traynor in 1969, a nightclub promoter who promised her fame and freedom. What she got was control and violence. Traynor pushed her into sex work almost immediately. Friends later testified that he used threats and physical abuse to keep her obedient. By 1972, he was managing her in the adult film industry. Under his pressure, she starred in Deep Throat, a low-budget movie that became one of the biggest adult films in history. It grossed over $100 million worldwide and turned Linda into an unwilling icon of the sexual revolution. To the public, she was confident and smiling. Off camera, she was terrified. In later interviews and her autobiography Ordeal, 1980, she revealed that Traynor forced her into both pornography and prostitution. "I was a captive," she wrote. "He had a gun, and he had me." Her claims were later supported by feminist figures like Gloria Steinem and organizations that documented her abuse. Her attempt to rebuild her life after leaving Traynor was difficult. Hollywood distanced itself from her, and the adult film industry dismissed her accusations. But she continued speaking out, testifying before U.S. congressional committees in the 1980s about exploitation in pornography. She said she wanted to warn others about coercion disguised as consent. By the 1990s, Lovelace had become a symbol of survival rather than scandal. She advocated for anti-trafficking causes and lived quietly with her family in Colorado. Despite the pain attached to her past, she often said she didn't regret speaking out. "Silence," she told reporters, "is how they win." Madonna's New York survival hustle. When Madonna stepped off the bus in New York City in 1978, she had $35 and no plan beyond not going home. She'd grown up in Michigan, restless and sure that life had to be bigger than factory jobs and Sunday dinners. New York was loud, dirty, and alive. She wanted all of it. She found work wherever she could, waitressing, dancing, posing for art classes. Money was never enough. Rent in the East Village took most of it, and nights often ended with her sleeping on couches or in rehearsal studios. Friends later said she would go days without food, saving what little she had for subway fares. In interviews, she was blunt about those years. "I slept with men to eat," she told one reporter decades later. "It wasn't confession or shock value. It was survival." Many women in that scene mixed art, hustle, and transactional relationships to stay afloat. Madonna didn't hide that part of her story. She said it made her fearless. She joined a few underground bands, performing at CBGB and Max's Kansas City, clubs that reeked of beer and sweat but birthed legends. When she wasn't on stage, she modeled nude for small photography projects to pay for demo recordings. Those photos later resurfaced in magazines, and instead of denying them, she shrugged. "I'm not ashamed of anything I've done," she said. "Everything led me here." By 1982, her demos landed in the hands of Sire Records. Her first single, Everybody, became a club hit. 1 year later, Holiday made her a star. The same grit that carried her through cold nights in Manhattan now powered her stage persona. What separated her from others wasn't talent alone, it was nerve. She didn't apologize for ambition, sexuality, or survival. When tabloids tried to use her past against her, she flipped the story. "I was poor," she said. "That's the truth. But I was never powerless." Frocky Lord's underage exploitation. Born Nora Kuzma in Ohio in 1968, she ran away from home as a teenager, hoping for freedom and a new start. Los Angeles looked exciting but dangerous for someone her age. With a fake ID and a new name, she was drawn into an adult industry that didn't ask enough questions. Her identification said she was 21. She was 16. Producers accepted it, and she was soon working in an environment that should have protected her, not exposed her. Between 1984 and 1986, she appeared in dozens of adult films. When the truth came out in a 1986 FBI investigation, the industry went into shock. Every production she appeared in was pulled, and the scandal made national headlines. Trotzy later said she'd been manipulated and pressured by people who knew she was vulnerable. In her autobiography, Underneath It All, she described being promised safety and opportunity, only to find control and fear instead. "They saw what they wanted to see," she wrote, "not what was real." Her story revealed how easily young people could be exploited in an unregulated system. After the investigation, she stepped away from the industry completely. For several years, she kept out of the public eye, taking classes and focusing on rebuilding her life. In the 1990s, she began acting again, this time in mainstream film and television. Her appearance in Crybaby, 1990, with Johnny Depp marked a fresh start. Critics noticed her charm and talent, and audiences saw a woman reclaiming her narrative. She later spoke publicly about her experience, emphasizing prevention and protection for others. When she testified before Congress, she urged lawmakers to strengthen ID laws and protect minors from recruitment and exploitation. "I was a child," she said quietly, "and no one cared to look closer." Tila Tequila's early online hustle. Before social media stars became a business, Tila Tequila figured out how to turn attention into income. Born Tila Nguyen in Singapore in 1981 and raised in Texas, she grew up feeling like an outsider. By her late teens, she was determined to stand out. She left home, moved to California, and started posting photos on small websites long before Instagram or OnlyFans existed. The internet of the early 2000s was raw and unfiltered. Tila used it to her advantage. She modeled for men's magazines, took adult-themed photo shoots, and eventually worked as an escort for a brief period, something she later acknowledged in interviews. What she learned during those years was how visibility worked, how people paid for personality as much as they did for appearance. By 2003, she was one of the first models to build a fan base directly online. Her MySpace page grew into one of the most followed accounts in the world. She mixed flirtation, humor, and emotional honesty, turning internet curiosity into steady fame. It was digital-era survival using connection as currency. Mainstream media caught on fast. She appeared on magazine covers, hosted parties, and landed a reality show, A Shot at Love with Tila Tequila, on MTV in 2007. The show featured men and women competing for her attention, a format that made her one of the first openly bisexual reality stars on American television. It also made her one of the first people to turn early online exposure into national recognition. She faced backlash, of course. Critics called her controversial, but she shrugged it off. "People can say what they want," she said in an interview. "I know what I built from nothing." Her confidence came from years of independence in spaces most people never saw as legitimate work. Tila later struggled with fame's darker side, online harassment, addiction, and isolation, but she always admitted that her career started with hustle, not luck. She turned self-promotion into a profession before social media influencers existed. For all its controversy, her story marked a turning point. The internet stopped being a backroom secret and became a global stage. Tila Tequila didn't wait for Hollywood to discover her. She made herself impossible to ignore. Cardi B's strip club years. Before the Grammy wins, before the red carpets, Cardi B was a teenager trying to survive the Bronx. Born Belcalis Almanzar in 1992, she grew up between a Dominican father and Trinidadian mother, in a family that worked hard but earned little. She dropped out of college and found herself in an abusive relationship with no way to pay bills. At 19, she made a choice that changed everything. She started dancing. Cardi has never hidden that part of her life. She worked at a strip club in Manhattan and often said it saved her. "It was the best thing that happened to me," she told The Guardian. "It got me out of a bad situation." The job gave her control, income, and a way to rebuild her confidence. While others judged, she focused on the goal: financial freedom. She used her earnings to rent an apartment, fix her teeth, and start building an online following. Her personality, loud, funny, and brutally honest, turned her into a viral sensation on Vine and Instagram. Fans loved that she didn't pretend to be something she wasn't. She'd post videos talking about money, relationships, and survival with the kind of honesty no publicist could script. In 2015, she joined the cast of Love and Hip Hop, New York. Within a year, she left the show to pursue music full-time. Her debut single, Bodak Yellow, hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 Inches 2017, making her the first female rapper in nearly 20 years to do it solo. Every interview, every lyric, every laugh carried echoes of the girl who once counted tips under neon lights. Cardi never apologized for her past. She said stripping taught her work ethic, confidence, and boundaries. "I don't regret anything," she told Rolling Stone. "Everything I did got me where I am." She used that story to empower other women who've been shamed for doing what they had to do. By owning her history instead of hiding it, Cardi B turned survival into success. The same grit that helped her climb out of poverty made her unstoppable. She started in a strip club, but she ended up on top of the music world on her own terms.
They made us laugh. They made us cry. They made us believe in their on-screen personas. But when the cameras stopped rolling, their true nature came out, and it's nothing like what you expected. The Family Man's Dark Side. For years, Bill Cosby was America's favorite TV dad. On The Cosby Show, he played the perfect father, funny, wise, and full of life lessons. Off-screen, he gave speeches about family values and personal responsibility. But behind the friendly image, there was a much darker truth. For decades, rumors followed him, but few questioned his reputation. That changed in 2014 when comedian Hannibal Buress called him out during a stand-up show. The clip went viral, and suddenly, the world started listening. One by one, women came forward, sharing nearly identical stories. More than 60 women accused Cosby of drugging and assaulting them. Many had been too scared to speak out earlier. He was rich, powerful, and had a spotless public image, but the details were disturbing. Aspiring actresses, models, and even colleagues said he lured them in with promises of mentorship, only to betray them. In 2015, Cosby was arrested for assaulting Andrea Constand, a former Temple University employee. The case went to trial, and in 2018, he was found guilty. He was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison, becoming the first major celebrity of the Me Too era to be convicted. But in 2021, his conviction was overturned due to a legal technicality. A past deal with a prosecutor should have prevented the trial from happening. Just like that, Cosby walked free. Even though he was legally released, his career was finished. TV networks pulled The Cosby Show, schools took back honorary degrees, and fans turned away. The man who once lectured others about morality had been exposed as a predator. He still denies the accusations, but his reputation is beyond repair. The talk show tyrant. For years, Ellen DeGeneres was the face of kindness. Her talk show made millions smile with heartwarming surprises, funny celebrity interviews, and feel-good moments. She ended every episode with the words, "Be kind to one another." But behind the scenes, former staff said kindness was the last thing they experienced. In 2020, reports surfaced that working on The Ellen DeGeneres Show was a nightmare. Employees described a toxic workplace filled with fear, intimidation, and unfair treatment. Some were fired after taking medical leave or attending family funerals. Others were told not to look Ellen in the eye. There were even accusations of harassment by top producers, which led to multiple firings. At first, Ellen brushed off the backlash, claiming she had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. But more and more people spoke out. Former guests revealed cold, awkward interactions that clashed with Ellen's on-screen warmth. Celebrities like Dakota Johnson, Mariah Carey, and Brad Garrett hinted that Ellen's friendly TV persona was just an act. The damage was done. Ratings dropped fast, and advertisers started pulling away. In 2021, Ellen announced that her show would end after 19 seasons. She called it a personal decision, but many saw it as a direct result of the backlash. The comedian who was cruel. Chevy Chase was one of the biggest comedy stars of the 1970s and 80s. As an original Saturday Night Live cast member, he helped shape modern sketch comedy. His success led to major film roles in Caddyshack, National Lampoon's Vacation, and Fletch. On-screen, he played lovable, sarcastic wisecrackers. Off-screen, a different story. From the start of his career, Chase gained a reputation for being difficult. He left SNL after just one season, later returning to host and immediately clashing with the new cast. He insulted everyone, including then-rising star Bill Murray. Their feud got so bad that it turned into a physical fight backstage right before a live episode. His arrogance and mean-spirited humor weren't just aimed at co-stars. Writers, directors, and crew members often found him unbearable. Many claimed he was cruel for no reason, making racist, sexist, and demeaning jokes at others' expense. Will Ferrell once called him the worst SNL host he'd ever worked with. Chase's behavior followed him to film sets. During National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, his co-star Beverly D'Angelo said the entire cast had to adjust to his moods, never knowing if he'd be friendly or hostile that day. On the show Community, his treatment of colleagues reached a breaking point. He frequently insulted cast and crew, directing discriminatory comments toward Donald Glover. Show creator Dan Harmon openly criticized him, and Chase eventually left before the final season. Despite his legacy in comedy, Chase's reputation damaged his career. Once a top box office draw, he became increasingly difficult to work with. By the 2000s, leading roles dried up, and he was mostly remembered for his past work and his bad attitude. In interviews, Chase has admitted to being difficult, but often brushes it off as part of his personality. While some still see him as a comedy icon, others view him as an example of how ego and cruelty can overshadow talent. The philanthropist who lied. Jared Leto built a career on transformation. He's an Oscar-winning actor, a rock star with 30 Seconds to Mars, and a self-proclaimed deep thinker. His fans admire his dedication to roles, extreme method acting, and supposed generosity. But behind the carefully crafted image, Leto has faced serious allegations, ranging from cult-like behavior to inappropriate relationships with young fans. For years, stories circulated about his treatment of followers. His band, 30 Seconds to Mars, developed an intense fan base with Leto at the center. He launched a so-called exclusive retreat called Camp Mars, where fans paid thousands to attend. The event was marketed as a bonding experience, but many saw it as a money grab. Photos surfaced of Leto in white robes, surrounded by adoring fans, fueling comparisons to a cult. Then came the more troubling accusations. Multiple sources, including music journalists and social media users, have claimed Leto pursued teenage fans. Reports date back to the early 2000s, when he allegedly used his fame to lure underage girls into uncomfortable situations. A former music industry insider once said Leto had a reputation for targeting girls as young as 16. Though no formal charges have been filed, the whispers never stopped. Leto's behavior on film sets hasn't helped his case. He's known for extreme method acting, but some call it outright harassment. On the set of Suicide Squad, where he played the Joker, he allegedly sent disturbing gifts to co-stars, including used condoms and dead animals. Many dismissed it as a publicity stunt, but others saw it as unprofessional and unsettling. Despite the controversy, Hollywood continues to embrace him. He's still landing major roles and fronting luxury ad campaigns. When asked about the allegations, Leto stays silent or deflects. His fan base remains loyal, and his reputation, while damaged, hasn't fully crumbled. The romantic lead's abuse. Johnny Depp was once one of Hollywood's most beloved actors. With his roles in Edward Scissorhands, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, he built a reputation as the eccentric yet charming leading man. Fans saw him as misunderstood, artistic, and deeply romantic, but his off-screen relationships told a different story. In 2016, his ex-wife, actress Amber Heard, filed for divorce and accused him of domestic violence. She provided photos of bruises and claimed he had a history of alcohol-fueled rage. Depp denied everything, calling her a liar and an abuser herself. What followed was one of the most public and bitter celebrity legal battles in history. Heard wrote a 2018 op-ed describing herself as a survivor of domestic abuse without naming Depp. He responded by suing her for defamation, claiming she ruined his career. During the trial, shocking details emerged: drug binges, explosive fights, and violent texts where Depp described wanting to harm Heard. However, recordings also revealed Heard admitting to hitting Depp. The case divided the public. Some believed Heard, pointing to photos, testimonies, and court filings. Others sided with Depp, arguing Heard manipulated him and the media. In 2020, Depp lost a lawsuit against a British newspaper that called him a wife-beater, with the judge ruling the allegations were substantially true. Then came the 2022 U.S. trial, broadcast live to millions. This time, Depp won, with the jury ruling that Heard had defamed him, but the trial was less about proving innocence and more about public perception. Depp's fan base rallied behind him, while Heard's reputation collapsed. Despite the legal win, Depp's career took a hit. He lost his Pirates of the Caribbean role and struggled to rebuild his image. While some studios distanced themselves, others welcomed him back, including European filmmakers. The action star's fury. Steven Seagal built his career playing tough, unstoppable heroes. In the 80s and 90s, he was one of Hollywood's biggest action stars, leading films like Under Siege and Above the Law. On screen, he took down villains with ease. Off-screen, though, he had a reputation for being difficult, aggressive, and even dangerous. From the start, Seagal's behavior raised eyebrows. He often bragged about his martial arts skills, but many questioned his legitimacy. Co-stars and stunt performers accused him of intentionally hitting them during fight scenes, refusing to pull punches. Actor John Leguizamo recalled Seagal slamming him against a wall for laughing at him on set. His temper wasn't limited to film sets. Over the years, multiple women, including actresses and assistants, accused Seagal of misconduct. Some claimed he made inappropriate advances during auditions, often under the guise of private casting sessions. In 2018, 2 women accused him of assault, including one who said he attacked her when she was just 17. Siegel denied all allegations. His reputation for arrogance and hostility extended beyond Hollywood. Siegel frequently reinvented himself, at one point claiming he worked for the CIA. Later, he cozied up to world leaders, including Vladimir Putin, who granted him Russian citizenship. His growing political ties and controversial statements made him even more polarizing. By the early 2000s, Siegel's Hollywood career was fading. Directors avoided working with him due to his behavior, and he was relegated to low-budget, direct-to-video action films. Even then, reports of mistreatment and erratic behavior continued. Today, Siegel is more known for controversy than for movies. He still insists he's a martial arts master, a law enforcement expert, and a geopolitical strategist. But few take him seriously. Once a major star, his reputation for rage, dishonesty, and misconduct left his career in ruins. The singer who silenced victims. R. Kelly was a music icon. With hits like I Believe I Can Fly and Ignition, Remix, he dominated the R&B charts for decades. Fans saw him as a musical genius, a man who could turn emotions into timeless songs. But behind the fame, troubling accusations followed him for years, ones that were ignored or brushed aside until the truth became too big to hide. Whispers about Kelly's behavior started early in his career. In 1994, at 27, he secretly married 15-year-old Aaliyah using false documents. The marriage was annulled, but it raised serious questions. Then came the early 2000s when disturbing footage surfaced, allegedly showing Kelly involved in misconduct with a minor. He was charged, but avoided conviction in 2008 after the key witness refused to testify. Despite ongoing concerns, Kelly's career thrived. He continued performing to sold-out crowds, winning awards, and working with major artists. Many in the industry turned a blind eye, and those who spoke out were dismissed. For years, he used his wealth and influence to keep accusations quiet. Then, in 2019, Surviving R. Kelly aired. The documentary featured first-hand accounts from multiple women who described years of manipulation and control. The stories painted a disturbing pattern. Kelly allegedly isolated young women, cut them off from their families, and maintained an environment where he controlled every aspect of their lives. The backlash was immediate. His record label dropped him, streaming services pulled his music, and his career collapsed overnight. That same year, Kelly was arrested and charged with serious crimes, including exploitation, coercion, and racketeering. In 2021, he was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison. More convictions followed, sealing his fate. The activist's hidden hypocrisy. Sean Penn built a reputation as one of Hollywood's most intense actors. With 2 Academy Awards and standout performances in Mystic River and Milk, he was celebrated for his raw, emotional performances. Off-screen, he positioned himself as a champion of justice, advocating for disaster relief, human rights, and political reform. But while he spoke passionately about these causes, his personal history painted a far more complicated picture. Penn's reputation for fiery behavior dates back to the 1980s, during his marriage to Madonna. Their relationship was highly publicized, but behind the scenes, it was anything but picture perfect. In 1988, Madonna reportedly sought police assistance after an alleged violent incident. Though she later downplayed parts of the story, reports of Penn's temper followed him for years. His outbursts weren't limited to his personal life. Throughout his career, Penn frequently made headlines for aggressive run-ins with the media. He was known for clashing with paparazzi, sometimes physically, and even served time in 1987 for an altercation with a photographer. In another instance, he was caught on camera aggressively confronting a reporter, showing the same volatility he often criticized in others. Despite his activism, Penn's actions often contradicted his public stance. He supported humanitarian causes but had a history of heated confrontations with colleagues and journalists. His interviews were filled with harsh criticisms of Hollywood, politics, and even his peers, often sounding less like a voice for justice and more like someone settling personal scores. In later years, Penn's unpredictable behavior made him a controversial figure. While some admired his work in disaster relief, others questioned his motivations, seeing him as someone who inserted himself into global crises for attention. His political views also sparked backlash, with some calling him hypocritical for supporting leaders with questionable records. The fan favorites' manipulation. James Corden built a career on charm. As the host of The Late Late Show, he became a fan favorite with viral segments like Carpool Karaoke and Spill Your Guts or Fill Your Guts. His cheerful personality and self-deprecating humor made him seem relatable, an everyman who just happened to be famous. But behind the smiles and sing-alongs, former colleagues, restaurant staff, and even fans told a very different story. Rumors of Corden's behavior started surfacing years ago, mostly from people who worked behind the scenes. Writers from The Late Late Show claimed he was dismissive and belittling, taking credit for their work and creating a stressful environment. Despite his fun-loving on-screen presence, many described him as cold and uninterested when the cameras weren't rolling. The biggest hit to his reputation came in 2022 when a New York restaurant owner called him out for his treatment of staff. Corden was accused of being rude to servers, yelling over minor mistakes, and even demanding free drinks as compensation for small inconveniences. The backlash was immediate, forcing him to apologize publicly. But for many, the damage was done, especially as more people came forward with similar stories. Co-stars and industry insiders also had their share of complaints. Actor Patrick Stewart famously called Corden out during an awards event, implying he was arrogant and difficult to work with. Others claimed he often ignored fans in public unless cameras were around, making his friendly persona seem more like an act than reality. In 2023, Corden stepped away from The Late Late Show, insisting it was his decision to spend more time with family. But with his reputation taking multiple hits, some believed he saw the writing on the wall. The awards, Darling's Secret Life. Kevin Spacey was once one of Hollywood's most respected actors. With 2 Academy Awards for The Usual Suspects and American Beauty, plus a starring role in House of Cards, he was seen as a powerhouse of talent. His performances were intense, calculated, and unforgettable. But behind the prestige, a darker reality existed, one that would eventually destroy his career. In 2017, at the height of the Me Too movement, actor Anthony Rapp accused Spacey of inappropriate behavior when Rapp was just 14. Spacey responded with a public apology but attempted to shift the focus by making a statement about his personal life. The damage was immediate. His response was widely criticized as deflecting from the real issue. After Rapp's accusations, more people spoke out. Multiple individuals, including crew members from House of Cards, accused Spacey of misconduct and abuse of power. The accusations painted him as someone who used his influence to intimidate and manipulate others. The fallout was swift. Netflix dropped him from House of Cards, removing his character from the final season. Studios distanced themselves, and Spacey's planned projects were either shelved or recast. Ridley Scott even replaced him in All the Money in the World, reshooting Spacey's scenes with Christopher Plummer just weeks before the film's release. Spacey faced multiple legal battles in the years that followed. While he won some cases, including a 2022 civil trial against Rapp, other accusations led to criminal investigations. Though some charges were dropped, his once thriving career was over. By 2023, Spacey was attempting a slow return, claiming he had been unfairly canceled. But Hollywood hasn't welcomed him back. The actor who once held the industry in his grip is now largely forgotten, his talent overshadowed by the scandals that tore his career apart. Did you know that Susan Hayward, one of Hollywood's most celebrated actresses, once stood at the crossroads of life and death, not on a movie set but in real life during a nuclear bomb test? This chilling and lesser-known aspect of her life raises a curtain of mystery. How did a star, known for her captivating performances and striking presence, find herself in such a harrowing situation? And what were the hidden repercussions of this incident on her life and career? A Brooklyn beginning. Susan Hayward's story starts far from the glitz of Hollywood, in the working-class neighborhood of Flatbush, Brooklyn. Born Edith the Mariner on June 30, 1917, her early life was a far cry from the red carpets and glamorous gowns she would later become synonymous with. The eldest of 3 children, Hayward's upbringing was modest, with her father working as a transportation worker and her mother as an actress in local stage productions. From a young age, Hayward showed a spark of the determination and resilience that would later define her career. At the age of 7, a tragic accident left her with a severely broken ankle, an injury that doctors warned might cripple her for life. However, Hayward defied these grim predictions, not only walking again but eventually developing a graceful gait that would be admired on the silver screen. Hayward's interest in acting was kindled early, undoubtedly influenced by her mother's theatrical background. She attended Girls Commercial High School, now Prospect Heights High School, where she focused on secretarial skills, a pragmatic choice considering her family's financial constraints. However, her passion for performing couldn't be quelled. She participated in school plays and soon set her sights on a career in acting, driven by a combination of raw talent and a fierce ambition to rise beyond her humble beginnings. The first significant turn in Hayward's journey came in the form of a beauty contest. At the age of 17, she entered and won a beauty contest at the Brooklyn Paramount Theater. This victory wasn't just a testament to her striking looks, it was the gateway to her future in Hollywood. The contest caught the attention of talent scouts, setting her on a path that would lead her away from Brooklyn and towards the bright lights of California. However, the road to stardom was not a straight path. Hayward faced numerous rejections in her early days in Hollywood. She struggled to find her footing in an industry that was as demanding as it was dazzling. Yet, she didn't let these initial setbacks deter her. With each audition, with every small role, she honed her craft, showcasing a blend of grit and grace that would soon captivate audiences nationwide. Susan Hayward's journey from a Brooklyn neighborhood to Hollywood's elite circles is a story of perseverance and the relentless pursuit of a dream. It's a tale that begins not with the spotlight, but with the gritty determination of a young girl who refused to let her circumstances define her future. The breakout role. Susan Hayward's journey to stardom reached a pivotal moment with her role in the 1947 film Smash Up the Story of a Woman. This film not only showcased her exceptional acting skills, but also marked a significant transformation in her career, bringing her into the limelight as a serious Hollywood actress. Smash Up presented Hayward with a character that was complex and challenging. She portrayed Angie Evans, a talented singer who abandons her own career aspirations to support her husband's rise to fame. As her husband's career flourishes, Angie finds herself grappling with feelings of neglect and jealousy, spiraling into alcoholism. This role was a stark contrast to the more glamorous and superficial roles often assigned to actresses at the time. Hayward's portrayal of Angie's descent was both powerful and heart-wrenching, earning her widespread acclaim. Her performance in Smash Up was a masterclass in emotional depth and realism. Hayward captured the essence of a woman caught in the throes of personal turmoil, battling her demons and the societal expectations of her time. Her ability to convey the intricate emotions of her character won the hearts of audiences and critics alike, earning her the first Academy Award nomination of her career. This nomination was a milestone, solidifying her status as a leading actress in Hollywood. The film's success brought Hayward a new level of recognition and respect in the industry. She was no longer just another face in the crowd. She was now considered a formidable talent, capable of carrying a film with her powerful performances. Smash Up opened doors to more diverse and challenging roles, allowing Hayward to showcase the breadth of her acting range in the years that followed. The role of Angie Evans in Smash Up represented more than just a career breakthrough for Hayward. It was a defining moment in her personal journey as an artist. She had fought hard to reach this point, overcoming numerous rejections and setbacks in an industry that was as demanding as it was glamorous. Her performance in the film was a testament to her resilience and dedication to her craft, qualities that would continue to define her career. Smash Up, the story of a woman, remains a significant film in Hayward's filmography, not only for its critical success but also for the way it changed her trajectory in Hollywood. It was a turning point that marked the beginning of a new chapter for Hayward, one where she would continue to push boundaries and leave an indelible mark on the silver screen. Romance and turbulence. The personal life of Susan Hayward, much like her career, was filled with intense romances and emotional turbulence. Beyond the camera's gaze, Hayward navigated a complex world of love, heartbreak, and personal struggle that deeply influenced her both as a woman and an actress. Hayward's first marriage was to actor Jess Barker in 1944. This union, marked by its initial passion, soon turned tumultuous. The couple had twin sons, Gregory and Timothy, bringing a brief period of joy and stability. However, the marriage was strained by career pressures and personal differences. By 1954, after a decade of marriage, Hayward and Barker's relationship had deteriorated, culminating in a highly publicized and acrimonious divorce. The custody battle for their sons added to the turmoil, with Hayward eventually winning sole custody. Her divorce from Barker was not just a personal blow, but also a public spectacle, shedding light on the pressures faced by Hollywood stars in their personal lives. Despite the challenges, Hayward maintained a strong facade in public, channeling her emotional experiences into her performances. Hayward's second marriage, to businessman Floyd Eaton Chalkley, known as Chalky, in 1957, marked a stark contrast to her first. Chalkley was a stabilizing force in her life, bringing a sense of peace and contentment that had eluded her in her earlier years. Their marriage was a retreat from the Hollywood scene, as the couple spent much of their time in Carrollton, Georgia, away from the limelight. This period was a happy one for Hayward, as she found solace in the quieter life they built together. However, this happiness was short-lived, as Chalkley's death in 1966 left Hayward devastated. His passing marked a turning point in her life, plunging her into a deep grief that would profoundly affect her both personally and professionally. The loss of Chalkley was not just the loss of a partner, but a pivotal moment that changed the course of her life. Hayward's personal life was as dramatic and complex as any of her film roles. Her experiences with love, marriage, and loss shaped her, leaving an indelible mark on her character and career. The dichotomy of her passionate first marriage and the tranquil stability of her second offered a glimpse into the multifaceted nature of her personality and the depth of her emotional experiences. Hollywood's Golden Age. Susan Hayward's career in Hollywood's Golden Age was a testament to her versatility and tenacity as an actress. Following her breakthrough performance in Smash Up, Hayward established herself as a prominent figure in the film industry, delivering a series of powerful performances that showcased her range and depth. In the 1950s, Hayward starred in a variety of roles that highlighted her ability to tackle challenging and diverse characters. One of her notable performances during this period was in the film I'll Cry Tomorrow, 1955, where she portrayed Lillian Roth, a singer struggling with alcoholism. This role echoed her earlier performance in Smash Up and was critically acclaimed, earning her another Academy Award nomination. Hayward's portrayal of Roth was more than just a depiction of a woman battling addiction. It was a reflection of her own inner strength and ability to connect deeply with her characters. Her performances in such roles were not only technically proficient but emotionally resonant, often leaving a lasting impression on audiences. Another significant milestone in Hayward's career came with the film I Want to Live, 1958, where she played Barbara Graham, a woman wrongfully accused of murder and facing the death penalty. Hayward's portrayal of Graham was intense and gripping, earning her the Academy Award for Best Actress. This achievement was a pinnacle in her career, cementing her status as one of the era's most talented and respected actresses. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Hayward continued to appear in films that varied in genre and style, from romantic dramas to historical epics. Her ability to adapt to different roles and genres demonstrated her versatility as an actress. Hayward's dedication to her craft was evident in the way she immersed herself in her roles, often doing extensive research to bring authenticity to her performances. Hayward's success in Hollywood was not just a result of her talent, it was also a product of her determination and resilience in an industry known for its competitiveness and challenges. She navigated the complexities of Hollywood with a blend of grace and grit, earning the respect of her peers and the adoration of her fans. Facing adversity. Susan Hayward's journey through the heights of Hollywood stardom was not without its share of profound challenges, particularly concerning her health and the changing dynamics of the film industry. In 1955, during the filming of The Conqueror, Hayward and the rest of the cast were unknowingly exposed to radioactive fallout near the United States government's Nevada test site. This exposure had serious implications, as years later, it became evident that Hayward, along with other cast members, developed serious health issues, including cancer. Hayward's diagnosis of brain cancer in 1973 marked a significant shift in her life. The diagnosis came at a time when she was still an active and revered figure in Hollywood. Despite her illness, Hayward's commitment to her craft never wavered. She continued to act, demonstrating immense resilience and dedication. Her final film role was in The Revengers, 1972, a testament to her enduring spirit in the face of adversity. The diagnosis and subsequent battle with cancer were not the only challenges Hayward faced. The 1960s brought about a significant transformation in Hollywood, with emerging new genres and a shift in the audience's preferences. This change in the industry landscape led to a decrease in the types of roles that had made Hayward a star. As a result, she had to navigate a rapidly evolving industry that was moving away from the traditional dramas and romantic films that had defined her earlier career. Hayward's struggle with health issues coincided with these professional challenges, marking a period of adversity that tested her in various ways. Despite these obstacles, she remained a respected figure in the industry, her legacy as a talented and versatile actress undiminished. Hayward's ability to face these challenges head-on was indicative of her strong character and her unwavering passion for acting. Throughout these difficult times, Hayward maintained a degree of privacy, choosing to confront her health battles away from the public eye. This decision reflected her desire to face her struggles on her own terms, away from the glare of Hollywood's spotlight. The comeback. After facing significant health challenges and navigating the evolving landscape of Hollywood, Susan Hayward made a remarkable comeback, demonstrating her incredible resilience and passion for acting. In the early 1970s, following her diagnosis and treatment for brain cancer, Hayward took a hiatus from acting to focus on her health. This period was one of introspection and recovery for her, as she battled the illness that had come to define a significant part of her life during this time. However, her spirit and love for the art of acting remained undiminished, and she soon felt the pull of the silver screen once again. Hayward's return to acting was marked by her performance in the made-for-television movie Say Goodbye, Maggie Cole, 1972. This role was a testament to her enduring talent and determination. In the movie, Hayward portrayed a doctor grappling with the decision to leave her profession, a poignant parallel to her own life's challenges and decisions at the time. Her performance was met with critical acclaim, proving that her skills as an actress were as sharp as ever. This comeback was not just a return to acting, it was a statement of Hayward's unwavering resolve in the face of personal and professional obstacles. Her ability to deliver a powerful performance after such a challenging period was a source of inspiration to many and solidified her reputation as one of Hollywood's most resilient stars. The success of Say Goodbye, Maggie Cole opened up new opportunities for Hayward. She went on to appear in several more television movies and continued to receive praise for her work. These roles allowed her to explore different character types and storytelling formats, showcasing her versatility as an actress. Hayward's return to the spotlight was also a period of personal growth and change. She had faced down one of life's greatest challenges and emerged with a renewed sense of purpose and commitment to her craft. This period in her career was a reflection of her ability to adapt, to overcome, and to continue to captivate audiences with her performances. Susan Hayward's comeback in the early 1970s was a remarkable chapter in her life, highlighting her resilience and dedication. It was a period that saw her not only return to what she loved, but also triumph over the adversities that had threatened to derail her career and her life. Hayward's journey during this time was a powerful reminder of the strength and determination that characterized her both on and off the screen. Mystery and controversy. The life of Susan Hayward was not just a tapestry of cinematic achievements and personal battles. It was also woven with threads of mystery and controversy that often eluded the public eye. While she graced the silver screen with poise and elegance, her life off-screen was marked by episodes that remained largely unknown to her fans. One such episode revolved around Hayward's connection to the infamous Hollywood blacklist era. During the 1940s and 1950s, the Red Scare swept through Hollywood, leading to the blacklisting of many artists accused of having communist ties. Hayward's name appeared on an FBI list of potential communist sympathizers, a revelation that shocked many. The details of her alleged involvement and political leanings were murky, but the mere association with the blacklist brought a shadow of suspicion over her during a tumultuous time in Hollywood history. Hayward's life was also marked by a series of lesser-known romantic entanglements and friendships that played a significant role in her personal journey. Her close relationship with actor and singer Dean Martin, for instance, was a subject of much speculation. While they shared a deep bond, the true nature of their relationship remained a subject of conjecture. This ambiguity added an element of intrigue to Hayward's persona, as fans and the media speculated about the private life of the enigmatic actress. Another controversial aspect of Hayward's life was her rumored rivalry with fellow actress Ava Gardner. While the extent of this rivalry was likely exaggerated by the press, it was reflective of the competitive atmosphere of Hollywood at the time. The narrative of conflict between two leading actresses was a staple of Hollywood gossip, adding to the mystique surrounding Hayward's career. Hayward's health struggles also gave rise to a series of controversies and rumors. Following her diagnosis with brain cancer, there was much speculation about the cause of her illness. The link between her cancer and the radioactive fallout from the Nevada test site during the filming of The Conqueror was a topic of debate and concern, raising questions about the safety measures in the film industry at the time. Despite the mysteries and controversies that surrounded her, Hayward navigated her life with a level of discretion that was uncommon in the world of Hollywood. She rarely addressed the rumors and speculation head-on, choosing instead to maintain a dignified silence. This approach only fueled the curiosity and fascination of her fans and the media, who continued to be intrigued by the enigmatic figure of Susan Hayward. Final years. As the 1970s progressed, Susan Hayward's life took a turn away from the Hollywood spotlight, marking a period of introspection and relative solitude. Following her remarkable career and her courageous battle with health issues, Hayward chose a more secluded life, stepping back from the public eye and the industry that had defined much of her existence. Hayward's final years were spent in her home in Beverly Hills and at her farm in Carrollton, Georgia, a place that had brought her much peace and happiness during her marriage to Floyd Eaton Chalkley. After his death in 1966, the farm remained a sanctuary for Hayward, a place where she could find solace and a sense of normalcy away from the glares of Hollywood. In these years, Hayward's focus shifted significantly. She spent her time engaging in simple pleasures and pursuits, far removed from the demands and rigors of her acting career. She found joy in the quietude of her surroundings, embracing the tranquility that her life away from Hollywood offered. However, the privacy of her final years did not entirely shield her from public attention. Hayward's fans and the media continued to show interest in her life, eager for updates on the beloved actress. Despite this, Hayward maintained a discreet and dignified presence, rarely making public appearances or statements. Hayward's health remained a concern during these years. The effects of her cancer diagnosis and treatment were ever present, but she faced these challenges with the same resilience that had characterized her approach to earlier obstacles in her life. She managed her health privately with the support of close friends and family. Susan Hayward passed away on March 14, 1975, at the age of 57. Her death marked the end of an era in Hollywood and the conclusion of a life that had been marked by extraordinary talent, personal strength, and a level of mystique that is rare in the world of celebrity. The final part of Susan Hayward's life, spent away from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, was reflective of her desire for a simpler, more grounded existence. It was a time for her to reflect, to find peace, and to live on her terms. Her retreat from the public eye was a choice that allowed her to cherish her privacy and independence in her remaining years. Hayward's life, both in its public triumphs and private retreat, remains a captivating narrative of one of Hollywood's most enduring figures.
The year was 1943. A film sat locked in vaults too scandalous for theaters. At the center, a woman lying in hay rewriting what was allowed on screen. This wasn't Monroe or Gardner. It was Jane Russell, and her story only gets wilder from here. The bra that launched a legend. The Outlaw wasn't supposed to be a scandal. It was a low-budget Western by Howard Hughes, starring a newcomer named Jane Russell. But Hughes had something bigger in mind. He didn't just want a movie, he wanted shock value. Russell was only 21, with no major roles behind her. Hughes cast her as Rhea McDonald, a sultry saloon girl. During filming, he became obsessed with how her figure appeared on screen. Costumes didn't give him the look he wanted, so he built his own solution, a new kind of bra. Metal rods, wiring, and padding were sewn into a custom design meant to lift her bust unnaturally high. Hughes even filed a patent for it. Jane hated it. "That thing hurt like hell," she said years later. "I threw it in the trash and wore my own." Despite that, Hughes told the press she wore his invention. He wanted the story to spread, and it did. Then came the haystack photo. A publicity still showed Russell reclining in hay, blouse barely holding on. No moviegoers cared about the plot. They wanted to see that image. Theaters received angry letters. Religious groups protested. One censorship board called the photo morally dangerous. The production code refused to approve the movie. Hughes had a plan. He sent fake protest letters to theaters claiming outrage from concerned citizens. It worked. Curious crowds showed up in droves. The limited release in 1943 was chaos. In New York and Los Angeles, people lined up for blocks. In some cities, police were called to manage traffic. Chicago shut the film down mid-run. Jane Russell had barely opened her mouth on screen, but her image was already burned into American culture. The Outlaw didn't make her a star because of her acting. It made her a symbol of everything Hollywood was afraid to show. The full nationwide release didn't happen until 1946. By then, she didn't need it. She was already the most talked about woman in Hollywood. And she had done it without saying a word. Headlines, contracts, and control. After The Outlaw stirred controversy in 1943, Jane Russell's name never left the papers, but behind the headlines, she was caught in a mess of studio politics, lawsuits, and image control. She hadn't asked for any of it. Howard Hughes had her locked under an exclusive contract. That meant no other studio could touch her, and she couldn't choose her roles. She later said, "I was stuck doing whatever he wanted. I couldn't even accept better parts." For years, Hughes refused to loan her out, even when major studios begged. Warner Brothers, MGM, and Paramount all showed interest. Hughes said no. During that time, Jane wasn't making movies. Instead, she was doing press, magazine covers, pin-up shoots, public appearances. It was all meant to keep her famous without ever stepping on set. She became one of the most photographed women in America without releasing a single new film. Then came the court battles. Film censors still tried to block the outlaw from playing nationwide. Hughes fought back with everything he had: lawyers, appeals, even threats to pull his other films from theaters. Jane stayed quiet in public, but admitted later she hated the circus. "I wanted to act, not pose for ads." In 1946, the film finally got wide release. It made millions. Critics weren't kind. Most called the acting wooden and the story dull. But it didn't matter. People came to see her. Hughes had turned Jane into a brand, not an actress. Finally, in 1947, Jane got a new project, Young Widow. It was her first non-Hughes production. The script had depth, and she was eager to prove she could act. But the damage had been done. Audiences still saw her as the hey girl. Reviews were mixed. Some praised her presence. Others said she was stiff. She later admitted she was still learning. Still, she wasn't going away. The public had decided Jane Russell was worth watching, even if no one could agree on why. For better or worse, her image had already outgrown the screen. And Hughes? He still wasn't done pulling the strings. Jane versus Hollywood. By 1948, Jane Russell was trapped between fame and frustration. She was known everywhere, but barely working. Hughes continued to control her roles and turn down outside offers. She started to push back. Hughes offered her a part in The Paleface, a comedy western with Bob Hope. Jane didn't think she could do comedy, but she said yes just to get back in front of a camera. It turned out to be a smart move. The film was a hit. Audiences loved her timing, and critics admitted she held her own next to Hope. It was the first time she got to show range. But things weren't smooth behind the scenes. Jane had no power over her career choices. Hughes micromanaged every decision. He approved costumes, scripts, even haircuts. Jane called him obsessed with control. She began quietly asking her lawyers for a way out of the contract. Meanwhile, gossip columns tracked her every move. She was photographed constantly but rarely quoted. Journalists described her as cool, hard to read, and aloof. In truth, she was tired of being treated like a mannequin. Her public image was sex symbol. In private, she was religious, blunt, and preferred quiet. In 1949, she shot The Big Steal with Robert Mitchum. The production was rushed because Mitchum had just been arrested for marijuana possession. The studio needed good press fast. Jane agreed to the project on short notice. It was a basic crime story, but again, she handled it well. Mitchum later said, "Jane was tougher than anyone gave her credit for." She wanted more like that, less glamour, more grit. But Hughes still had her locked down. In 1950, she'd publicly clashed with studio heads over the roles she was being offered. She turned down several scripts and refused to pose for certain publicity shots. That made her difficult in Hollywood terms. Jane wasn't playing along anymore. She wanted to act, not sell. And slowly, people were starting to listen. The pinup girl had found her voice, and she was just getting warmed up. Diamonds, Blondes, and a Stolen Show. In 1953, Jane Russell landed what should have been a supporting role. Instead, she nearly stole the film. The movie? Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Her co-star? Marilyn Monroe. Monroe played the sweet, flirty Lorelei. Jane played Dorothy, the sharp brunette who called the shots. On paper, Marilyn was the lead. But on screen, Jane dominated scene after scene. Her timing was cleaner. Her delivery was drier. Her attitude? Unshakable. Most people don't know this. Jane didn't want to do it at first. She thought the musical numbers were silly, but the studio pushed her in, and once filming started, she didn't hold back. She handled her own vocals, danced in heels, and rewrote parts of her dialogue. Monroe had more screen time, but Jane had more control. Crew members said Russell often calmed Marilyn down between takes. She reportedly helped block scenes and guided Monroe through complex shots. Then came the premiere drama. Here's the rumor. Monroe refused to attend the Blonde's premiere in Hollywood, so Jane showed up alone and played both roles on the red carpet. She even signed Monroe's name for fans. Reporters called her a total pro and said she carried the night without breaking a sweat. The movie became a global hit. Jane's performance was praised for being grounded and funny, while Marilyn got the attention for her beauty. But behind the scenes, even executives said Jane held the film together. She never bragged about it. In interviews, she gave Monroe credit and avoided drama. But those who worked on the film knew the truth. Jane was the adult in the room. She showed up on time, knew her lines, and never cracked under pressure. That role cemented her as more than a body or a photo. She could act, she could command, and she could outshine a legend without even trying. Hollywood had underestimated her again, but this time everyone saw what she could really do, and Jane didn't need hay or headlines to prove it. The Hollywood Bowl baptism. In 1954, Jane Russell shocked fans again, but this time it had nothing to do with movies or costumes. She stepped into the waters of the Hollywood Bowl in front of thousands and got baptized. It wasn't a publicity stunt. Jane had always kept her faith private. She was raised in a deeply religious home and read the Bible daily. But the tension between her image and her values was growing. After years of posing in tight gowns and playing bombshell roles, she wanted to make a statement. That statement came during a Billy Graham revival event. The massive crowd watched as Jane walked into the water and was fully submerged. It made headlines the next morning. "Movie siren gets saved," one paper wrote. Others called it a mid-career pivot, but Jane didn't care. After that, she became more vocal about her beliefs. She gave interviews criticizing the moral direction of Hollywood. She said too many films celebrated sin and called some of her past work foolish. She even started a group called WAIF, World Adoption International Fund, combining her faith and advocacy. This turn confused people. She was still doing movies and still dressing glamorously, but now she was talking about Jesus on talk shows. Some fans loved it, others tuned out. The industry didn't know how to handle her shift. She didn't back down. In public speeches, she warned young actors to stay grounded and avoid the fast track to ruin. In private, she mentored struggling performers behind the scenes. But not everyone supported her. Some Hollywood insiders mocked her open faith. She was accused of being judgmental and old-fashioned. Producers called her unpredictable. Studios didn't know if she'd promote a film or preach at the premiere. Jane didn't care. She wasn't asking for approval anymore. The woman once labeled too hot for theaters was now talking about redemption and doing it on her own terms. And while the cameras rolled on others, Jane rewrote her own script in real life. Fight with the church. After several miscarriages, she decided to adopt, but adoption in the 1950s wasn't simple, especially across borders. Her first adopted son, Tommy, came from Ireland. The process took over a year. Jane grew frustrated with red tape and church politics. She believed too many kids were stuck in orphanages while paperwork dragged on. In interviews, she called the system heartless and said it cared more about rules than children. So she took matters into her own hands. In one case, she flew overseas, met with the child's caretakers, and returned with the baby before full approval. She claimed it was legal under emergency conditions. Authorities disagreed. The press labeled it baby smuggling. Jane called it saving a life. That incident pushed her to create WAIF, the World Adoption International Fund. It helped connect orphans with families worldwide. Jane used her fame to pressure lawmakers and raise money. She testified in front of Congress and worked with embassies to change regulations. But the backlash was real. Catholic leaders in Ireland accused her of undermining church-run orphanages. One priest called her reckless and self-righteous. Jane fired back, saying the church cared more about control than compassion. Despite the criticism, she expanded her work. WAIF helped place hundreds of children in homes during its peak. Jane personally reviewed applications and even helped pay travel costs for some families. She wasn't just a spokesperson, she was hands-on. This wasn't the Hollywood work people expected from a screen siren, but Jane didn't care about expectations. She said, "If I'd waited for the world's approval, I'd still be posing in hay." Her house in California became a hub for her causes. Her kids lived outside the spotlight, and she rarely talked about them publicly, but in her later interviews she called them her greatest work. The roles in film paid the bills. The work in adoption, she said, saved her soul. Russell versus feminism. In an era when women's liberation was gaining momentum, Jane took the opposite path, and she made sure everyone knew it. She called second-wave feminism a mess of angry women yelling about problems they created. In one 1,973 interview, she said, "I don't know what they're fighting for. I never had to fight for anything." That quote alone set off a storm. Talk show hosts loved booking her. She clashed with feminist guests and stood her ground, even when audiences booed. She argued that women already had power but were wasting it on resentment. "I've worked with men my whole life," she said. "I never needed to burn my bra to get respect." Her words drew backlash. Gloria Steinem's supporters called her outdated. Some women's groups urged sponsors to drop her from endorsements. But Russell didn't flinch. She said modern feminists misunderstood strength. Strength isn't about shouting. It's about knowing who you are. She also attacked Hollywood for portraying women as helpless victims or hypersexualized cliches. Ironically, critics pointed out that her early roles did exactly that. Jane didn't deny it, but said the problem wasn't the image. It was the intention behind it. By this time, she was focused on her religious activism and charity work. But her conservative takes made headlines more than her advocacy. She called Roe v. Wade a mistake and said America needed less therapy and more churches. She wasn't trying to please anyone. The feminist movement saw her as a relic. Her fans saw her as fearless. Either way, she stayed visible. While other actresses her age faded quietly, Jane Russell kept showing up, louder, bolder, and completely unwilling to change. Love her or hate her, she refused to play the part anyone handed her. At 60 and still breaking rules. In the 1980s, most actresses from Jane Russell's era were long retired. Not Jane. At 60, she signed a national ad deal to model Playtex bras. The ads ran on television, in magazines, and in stores across America. Most women her age were expected to disappear from the spotlight, but Jane showed up in full glam, pitching support bras to real women. The tagline, "Does your bra have to show your age?" Jane didn't think so. Critics rolled their eyes. She didn't care. "I wore bras before most of these ad execs were born," she joked in an interview. "I know what works." And she meant it. The campaign was a hit. Sales spiked, especially among older women who saw her as relatable, not ridiculous. But this comeback wasn't just about ads. She started making more public appearances again. Church groups, charity galas, even morning talk shows. She wasn't doing movies, but she wasn't fading away either. She found a way to stay in front of the public without pretending to be younger than she was. And she wasn't afraid to call out ageism. When a reporter asked if she'd consider a comeback film, she replied, "Sure, if they let me play a 60-year-old woman who acts like one." She also joked that it was the first time in her life people cared about her comfort more than her figure. Back then, it was all underwire and pain. Now it's all soft cups and scents. Took long enough. The lingerie campaign made headlines, not for shock, but for surprise. No one expected Jane Russell, the once silent symbol of scandal, to become the face of grown-up confidence. She wasn't trying to seduce anymore. She was trying to relate. And that hit harder than any bombshell act ever could. In a business that tossed women aside after 40, Jane Russell didn't just refuse to disappear. She came back in a bra and reminded the world who she was. And she did it with a wink, not an apology. Outspoken, unfiltered, and unbothered. While most Golden Age stars slipped into quiet retirement, Jane cranked up the volume. She gave interviews that often went viral, at least by pre-internet standards. On one local television segment, she called modern movies trash with sound effects. She criticized rising stars for acting like victims instead of women. One host tried to steer her back to polite conversation. Jane doubled down. She also leaned harder into politics. She identified as a proud conservative, supported prayer in schools, and spoke at several Republican events. She criticized Hollywood's moral decay and said most actors today were spoiled and spineless. These statements didn't win her new fans, but they kept her in the press. In 1999, she made headlines again for all the wrong reasons. She was arrested for driving under the influence in California. Her blood alcohol level was nearly twice the legal limit. At the time, she was in her late 70s. The tabloids pounced. "Busted bombshell," read one headline. She didn't deny it, she didn't spin it, and she definitely didn't apologize in public. Instead, she joked about it later, saying, "At my age, you're lucky to get a story printed about you, even if it's for drinking." Even when called out, she rarely backed down. In one interview, she admitted she didn't believe in political correctness. "I say what I mean, and if you don't like it, turn the channel." No apologies to the end. She passed away in 2011 at the age of 89. True to form, her final years were lived without filters, edits, or apologies. She spent her last decade mostly in Santa Maria, California, staying active in her church and speaking at local events. Neighbors described her as approachable but blunt. If you asked about her past, she'd answer, but she wouldn't sugarcoat it. She didn't do nostalgic interviews. She didn't attend retrospectives. When asked why she skipped award shows or tributes, she said, "I didn't go for applause when I was working. Why would I show up for it now?" In her final interviews, she remained firm in her views. She still rejected modern feminism, still criticized Hollywood's direction, and still defended her early work, even the parts people once called scandalous. "I gave the public what they wanted," she said, "and I did it on my own terms." She also spoke about faith until the end. Church was her real stage, and she liked it that way. She called it the only place that never asked me to be something else. When news of her death broke, the headlines were predictable. Most focused on the outlaw, the hay photo, and her body. Few highlighted her decades of charity work, her fights with censors, or the fact that she'd outlasted most of her peers. Her family didn't issue a long statement. They said she passed peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by loved ones. No funeral spectacle, no red carpet send-off. And that felt right, because Jane Russell never needed the spotlight. She was the kind of star who took it, then handed it back when she was done. No legacy spin, no last-minute reinvention, just one final act of doing exactly what she always had. Living loud, aging honestly, and refusing to ever play by someone else's script.
One stare stopped a director cold. One scene made censors panic. And one decision nearly ended her career. Gene Simmons didn't hint. She exposed, "This isn't your grandmother's Hollywood story." War-era debut with big impact. Gene Simmons was just 14 when she stepped onto a movie set for the first time. The film, Give Us the Moon. It was a light comedy, but casting directors noticed something deeper in her, a mix of innocence and edge that didn't feel rehearsed. By 1945, she landed a small role in Caesar and Cleopatra, acting opposite Vivien Leigh and Claude Rains. Jean had no formal training, but her eyes stole every frame. Even with just a few lines, critics pointed her out. One review said she had more presence than most stars twice her age. That attention didn't go unnoticed. Back in London, she was already becoming a studio favorite. Directors liked that she followed direction perfectly, but still added something of her own. No one could quite explain it. She was quiet, respectful, but then delivered a performance with a surprising heat that caught people off guard. During this time, Britain was still recovering from war. Rationing was in full swing. But Jean was getting fitted for costumes, stepping onto grand sets and showing up in magazines. For a country looking for escape, she became a symbol of post-war hope.
and a bit of fantasy. Producers began casting her in roles meant for older actresses. She had the look of a teenager but the screen presence of a woman who'd lived through something. It made her unpredictable and hard to forget. The studios liked that, so did the public. What really set her apart, though, wasn't talent alone. It was how she made every close-up feel intimate. She didn't perform to the camera. She let the camera come to her. That kind of restraint, especially at 15, felt dangerous in the best way. Ophelia role that shocked all. At only 18, she was cast opposite Laurence Olivier, who also directed and starred as Hamlet. It was a bold choice. Some said she was too young, too unknown. But Olivier saw something in her others didn't. The moment the film premiered, critics couldn't stop talking. Her Ophelia was fragile but intense. The breakdown scene where she spirals into madness hit like a punch. She didn't scream or flail. She barely raised her voice, but her eyes, they told a story no one could look away from. One director on set said, "She didn't act the scene. She became it." That scene became one of the most talked about performances of the year. Some called it mesmerizing. Others said it was too much, too raw for such a young actress. The censors weren't thrilled either. They flagged her emotional scenes as too suggestive, even though she wasn't doing anything explicit. Just her face, sad, broken, and unfiltered, made people uncomfortable. Not because she did something wrong, but because she did it too well. Her performance earned her an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. It was rare for a British actress that young to get that kind of recognition in Hollywood, but Jean made it look effortless. What no one saw, though, was how tightly controlled the set was. Olivier was known to push actors hard. Simmons was often left exhausted after long takes. Some scenes took over a dozen tries just to get the right version of her breakdown. She never complained. Hamlet didn't just boost her career. It showed the world she wasn't afraid of complex roles. She didn't need flashy lines or big gestures. She used silence, stillness, and just one look. This wasn't a breakout. This was a warning. Jean Simmons didn't just belong in movies. She could change how they felt. Barefoot and bold in Himalayas. Jean Simmons wasn't the lead in Black Narcissus, but she might as well have been. She played Kanchi, a teenage girl from the Himalayas. No lines, no backstory, just movement, emotion, and presence. And it was enough to shake audiences and critics. She wore a thin sari, little makeup, and walked barefoot in most scenes. Her performance wasn't subtle. It was bold, sensual, and totally silent. For someone trained in British restraint, she went the other way completely. Viewers couldn't believe it was the same girl from Hamlet. The censors? They freaked out. A British girl in brownface was already controversial, but it was her physicality, how she walked, how she looked at men, how she moved through space, that made it feel charged. Some scenes were almost cut. Critics didn't know whether to praise her or scold her. What made it even wilder? Jean was only 19. She wasn't experienced in dance or physical theater. She learned everything on the spot, guided by directors Powell and Pressburger. They told her, "Don't think, just feel." And she did. The result was magnetic. Behind the scenes, Simmons was nervous. She worried about looking ridiculous. She hated the heavy body makeup. But when she saw the final cut, she realized she'd done something rare. She made people watch without saying a word. Her performance added tension to a film already full of it. Nuns fighting desire, isolation in the mountains, repressed emotions ready to blow. Jean's character was the spark, the reminder that human want couldn't be hidden forever. She wasn't glamorized. She wasn't polished. She was raw and young and almost too real for the screen. Audiences either gasped or looked away. That role changed everything. From then on, casting directors saw her differently. She could play quiet, yes, but she could also play dangerous. Not loud or messy, but the kind of dangerous that sneaks up on you. Marriage that silenced her voice. She married Stuart Granger in 1950. On paper, it looked like a Hollywood love story. He was a big name. She was the rising star. The press called them elegant, glamorous, perfect.
But the truth behind the curtain was less romantic and a lot more complicated. Granger was 16 years older. He was already famous when Gene met him on set. Their chemistry started fast. So did the control. Soon after the wedding, Granger took the reins. On decisions, on deals, even on what roles she took. The studios loved the image. They paraded the couple in magazines. But people close to Gene started noticing changes. She lost weight. She got quieter on set. Her fire was still there, but it felt dimmed. Granger didn't hide his jealousy. He hated how much attention Gene got. When she was offered lead roles, he often stepped in, saying the scripts weren't right for her. Some insiders say he even turned down roles on her behalf without telling her. Their marriage became a talking point, not for romance, but for the tension it created in her career. One studio exec said, "Gene was gold, but we couldn't get to her without going through Stewart." Still, she stayed, at least for a while. She did interviews with a smile. She played the devoted wife, but behind closed doors, she started pushing back. She wanted control over her own contracts. She wanted to work in America. Granger wasn't happy about it. The tension spilled into work. On the set of Young Bess, she reportedly clashed with crew members over last-minute changes made by Granger, who was constantly advising from behind the scenes. By the early 50s, it was clear this marriage wasn't boosting her career. It was stalling it, and Gene knew it. The girl who once shocked the screen in silence was now fighting to speak up off it. She sued Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes didn't hear no very often, but Gene Simmons gave it to him clear, firm, and without a pause. In 1951, she was under contract with the Rank organization in the UK, but Hughes wanted her for RKO in Hollywood, so he bought her contract. At first, it looked like a career jackpot. Bigger films, bigger budget, international stardom. But there was a catch. Hughes didn't want to make her a star. He wanted to own her. He sent her lavish gifts, jewelry, perfume, clothes. She sent them right back. He offered her roles, but only in projects he controlled. Scripts were delayed, promises were broken. Gene was stuck, contractually tied to RKO but barely working. Then came the final straw. Hughes tried to force her into a long-term extension. Gene said no. He pushed harder. She pushed back and sued him. That was a career gamble very few actresses would have dared to make, especially against a man with Hughes' power and reach. The court battle was ugly. She was accused of being ungrateful, difficult, spoiled, but she didn't flinch. Her attorney argued Hughes was deliberately obstructing her career, and he was. The judge sided with Gene. The court granted her the right to make one more film under RKO, but after that, she was free. That final film would be Angel Face. More on that next. The whole ordeal made headlines. Gene had taken on one of Hollywood's biggest moguls, and won. What made it wild wasn't just that she fought back, it was how calm she stayed doing it. No public outbursts, no gossip columns, just quiet, steady defiance. After the case, other actresses started to take note. Simmons had done what they were told was impossible. She stood up to the system without destroying herself in the process. Slip dress scene that stung. Angel Face was supposed to be just another noir, but Gene Simmons turned it into something unforgettable and nearly unwatchable for the censors. Directed by Otto Preminger, the film paired her with Robert Mitchum in a twisted love story full of mind games and manipulation. From her first scene, something felt off. In a good way, she wore a silk slip and moved through the frame like she knew exactly how much control she had. It was quiet, calculated, dangerous. Preminger pushed her hard. Some days, she left set in tears. One scene, where she slaps Mitchum, turned chaotic. He slapped her back, for real, not in the script. The camera kept rolling. That take made it into the final cut. The most talked-about scene was filmed in her bedroom. Gene wore a skimpy nightgown that barely passed code. Her expression? Cold, unreadable, hypnotic. Studio executives tried to reshoot it. Preminger refused. Simmons never apologized. The scene stayed. Critics weren't sure what to make of her. One said she was too still, too unreadable.
Another called her performance the quietest form of violence ever filmed. Audiences didn't know whether to root for her or run from her. That's exactly what Preminger wanted. Off-screen, Simmons kept it professional, but distant. She didn't like Preminger's style, but she respected the result. "It wasn't fun," she once said, but it worked. She knew what the role demanded, and she gave it, without blinking. Angel Face didn't do big box office, but it became a cult classic. Directors studied it, actresses copied her stillness, and fans replayed that one-bedroom scene like it was gospel. It proved she could lead a film, and terrify you doing it. This wasn't Gene Simmons the ingenue, this was Gene Simmons with teeth, and once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Backless photos stirred a storm. The robe was supposed to be a biblical epic, clean, reverent, traditional, but Gene Simmons made sure it came with a side of scandal, not because of anything in the script, but because of a single photograph. A promotional shot of Simmons in costume, barebacked, turned slightly, eyes locked on the lens, made its way into a national magazine. And suddenly people weren't talking about Roman history. They were talking about that image. She wasn't unclothed, but she didn't need to be. The curve of her back, the look on her face, it was suggestive without trying. It sparked a wave of backlash from conservative groups. Some theaters threatened to pull the film unless the image was censored. The studio quickly ordered retouched versions covering her back with added fabric. Simmons didn't protest. She also didn't apologize. What most people didn't know was that the robe marked the beginning of her freedom. It was her first film after winning her legal battle with Howard Hughes and RKO. No more interference, no more stalled scripts. She was finally in control of her career, or so she thought. Behind the scenes, she was still untangling contract fallout. Though legally free, industry politics meant many producers were hesitant to cast her right away. Her refusal to play by studio rules made her difficult. So even as The Robe became a box office hit, Jean was still proving she was bankable and independent. She was also stepping into a new kind of role, the strong, morally complex woman. No longer the wide-eyed ingenue, she now played characters torn by faith, loyalty, and quiet desire. That's what made her stand out in The Robe. While others delivered grand speeches, Jean did more with a glance or a pause. Staring down Spartacus with fire. By the mid-1950s, Gene Simmons had mastered the art of subtle danger. She didn't have to raise her voice or storm into a room to command attention. One stare from her could flip the energy of an entire scene, and nowhere was that more obvious than in Spartacus. She played Varinia, strong-willed, patient, deeply loving. But she wasn't just the love interest. She was the emotional core of the film, the quiet resistance behind Spartacus's rebellion. When Kirk Douglas's character meets her, she doesn't beg or flirt. She watches, she listens, and that look, equal parts softness and defiance, spoke volumes. The film was massive, huge budget, massive cast, but Simmons never got lost in the crowd. Even surrounded by warriors and senators, her presence held steady. One key scene in a bathhouse, fully clothed but emotionally bare, had audiences holding their breath. She wasn't there to seduce, but somehow she did. Director Stanley Kubrick said she could do more with silence than most actors could with 3 pages of dialogue. And that was true. She didn't rely on flashy performances. Her strength was restraint, holding back just enough to make viewers lean in. Her chemistry with Douglas was real, on screen at least. Off-screen, things were more tense. Douglas, ever the perfectionist, reportedly tried to direct her at times. Jean didn't bite. She followed Kubrick's lead and stuck to her style, one that didn't need constant rehearsal or rewrites, just space to breathe. What made Spartacus different was that it showed how far she had come. She was no longer being told how to act, dress, or behave. She chose this role, and she shaped it into something bigger than what was on the page. By now, Simmons had developed a signature move, holding the camera's gaze just a second too long. It was never overdone. Just enough to make the audience shift in their seats. That was her gift.
making discomfort feel beautiful, making modesty feel provocative. Post-divorce roles, no apologies. When Jean Simmons divorced Stuart Granger in 1960, Hollywood expected her to fade into the background. Instead, she did the opposite. She stepped into some of the boldest roles of her career. She wasn't trying to shock anyone, but she was finally calling the shots. And the first move? Elmer Gantry. In the film, she played Sister Sharon Falconer, a preacher with power, mystery, and unshakable confidence. Opposite Burt Lancaster, Simmons didn't flinch. Their chemistry felt electric, even hostile at times. Her character wasn't there to be conquered. She had her own mission and her own secrets. The role marked a shift. This was Jean fully in control. No studio head pulling strings, no husband weighing in, and it showed. Critics called her performance chillingly calm and quietly commanding. Audiences saw a version of Simmons they hadn't before, fierce, focused, and completely in her element. After that, the walls came down. In interviews, she started to speak more candidly. She admitted how controlled her earlier career had been. She talked about being dressed like a doll, told where to sit, when to smile. "I wasn't rebellious," she said, "I just had a brain." She also started choosing roles that mirrored her real-life complexity. In Life at the Top, she played a woman trapped in a cold marriage, giving one of her most emotionally raw performances. Critics noted how much pain she conveyed without raising her voice. Simmons had always known how to make silence speak, but now it screamed. By 1964, she had officially left her ingenue past behind. Her new characters were layered, modern, and sometimes bitter, but never weak. Whether playing women burned by love or cornered by power, Simmons always brought a sharp, grounded realism. Her personal life, she kept it quiet, no tabloid stunts, just work, and that work spoke volumes. Jean Simmons had survived the studio system, defied Hollywood men, and walked away from a toxic marriage. What came next wasn't a comeback, it was her full arrival. TV role that changed everything. In 1983, when most of her peers had faded into cameos or early retirement, Jean Simmons made a move that surprised everyone. She went to television. And not just any TV role. She signed on for The Thornbirds, a sweeping, high-stakes miniseries that would become a cultural event. She played Fiona Cleary, the cold, emotionally distant matriarch of the family. It was a huge shift from the warm, gentle characters people associated with Simmons. Fiona wasn't cruel, but she wasn't loving either. She was closed off, wounded, and quietly ruthless. And Jean played her with absolute control. Audiences didn't just watch The Thornbirds, they devoured it. Nearly 100 million people tuned in. Simmons held her ground against heavy hitters like Richard Chamberlain and Barbara Stanwyck. And in some scenes, she stole the spotlight entirely. It wasn't just the lines she delivered. It was how she sat, how she paused, how she looked away at just the right second. For that performance, she won the Emmy. But more than that, she won back visibility. She proved that actresses over 50 weren't just background players. They could lead, they could drive a story, and they could be just as bold, if not bolder, than they'd been decades earlier. Behind the scenes, Simmons was calm, professional, and laser-focused. Younger cast members described her as gracious but guarded. She wasn't there for gossip, she was there to work. One crew member recalled, "She'd walk onto set, say almost nothing, and nail it on the first take." That role capped off her transformation, from teenage ingenue to Hollywood rebel, from silent power to full-on matriarch. She had nothing left to prove, but somehow still delivered performances that left audiences stunned. Jean Simmons didn't reinvent herself, she just kept showing up exactly as she was, smart, subtle, and impossible to ignore. And by the time The Thornbirds aired, one thing was clear. She never needed to scream to make the whole room gasp.
She was the scream queen, the beautiful ghoul who kept horror fans at the edge of their seats for decades. This gorgeous and voluptuous lady knew just how to keep her fans coming back for more, and as a result of this, she made a name for herself as one of the most celebrated actresses in British horror cinema. But beyond the accomplishments and behind the scenes was a woman the world barely knew. From her dislike for watching horror films to her horrific real-life experiences, Ingrid Pitt's story will leave you wondering if you really knew her. Surviving the Nazis. Ingrid spent the most part of her life bringing horror stories to life, but what a lot of people don't know is that this actress was most likely good at depicting horror because she went through horrific experiences as a child. In a 2006 interview, she told with the New Zealand Herald this, "I think it's very amazing that I do horror films when I had this awful childhood, but maybe that's why I'm good at it." It all started on the 21st of November 1937 in Poland, where Ingrid was born in the midst of chaos. Over the years, there have been speculations that her real name was Ingushka Petrov, a name she later changed for personal reasons. Her father, who was German, and her mother, who was a Polish Jew, were both set to raise their children when life took an unexpected and horrific turn. A few years after Ingrid was born, tragedy struck. The Nazis picked up her family, and before she knew what was happening, Ingrid was separated from her father and her older sister. She had no idea where her father and sister were taken to, but was taken to the Stutthof concentration camp with her mother, where she came face to face with a real-life horror experience. Ingrid was just 5 years old at the time. One can only how traumatic this experience was. She saw little girls being maltreated and sexually assaulted. Ingrid also witnessed the death of her own mother's best friend. All these horrific things were happening right in front of her, but all she could do was to hope and pray that fate had a better plan and that sometime in the near future all these would come to an end. Sadly, the torture didn't end as soon as she hoped. Her and her mother were held there for the next 3 years with no hopes of returning to their normal lives. However, it was in the midst of this dark reality that she began to dream of a better life. She would often lay in the straw, imagining what her life would look like if she was someone else. There was something inside of her that made her believe that she was going to experience life through a different lens. Perhaps a life that was not marked by the confines and terrors of a concentration camp. From dream to reality. After 3 long and hard years, Ingrid and her mother left the camp after the war and began searching for her father and sister. Unfortunately, their hopes of reuniting the family dashed when her father was found. He had become a shadow of himself, and he passed away shortly after. During that period, Ingrid started nursing dreams of becoming an actress, and she decided to pursue this passion fiercely. She was said to have gotten involved in theater productions before she started her screen career. She became a well-known actress on the East Berlin stage, and the time she spent performing in theater enabled her to hone her skills before she started appearing in films. She spent the most part of the mid-1960s appearing in Spanish films. However, her roles were mostly uncredited. Interestingly, Ingrid could not speak Spanish at the time, but still found a way to immerse herself in the industry with the hopes of going international one day. Thankfully, her efforts paid off, and things started looking up for her when she landed a supporting role in the 1968 film Where Eagles Dare. In this film, she portrayed the role of Agent Heidi, and she appeared alongside Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood. This was the role that led to her being noticed by the executives of Hammer Film Productions. They knew that her Eastern European and glamorous looks combined with her talent was a recipe for success. Shortly after, she was given the role of vampiress Mircalla and was the beginning of a notable career in the horror genre, becoming the Queen of Horror. Ingrid's journey into the world of horror began in the late 1960s and early 1970s, an era marked by the resurgence of Gothic horror films. With her striking beauty, commanding screen presence, and a voice that could send shivers down your spine, Ingrid quickly became a sensation in the genre. It all started with her breakout role in The Vampire Lovers in 1970, a film that not only showcased her acting prowess but also solidified her status as a horror icon. As the enigmatic bloodsucker, Ingrid brought a seductive allure to the screen, redefining the image of female vampires in the process. But it wasn't just about the fangs and the supernatural. Ingrid Pitt had a way of infusing her characters with depth and complexity. In Countess Dracula, 1971, she portrayed the notorious Countess Elizabeth Bathory, blending horror with historical drama. The film wasn't just a showcase of her ability to instill fear, it was a masterclass in the art of combining terror with a touch of tragic humanity. Ingrid's reign as the Queen of Horror continued with films like The House That Dripped Blood, still in 1971, and The Wicker Man, 1973, where her performances left an indelible mark on the minds of horror enthusiasts. It wasn't just about the scares, it was about the intensity she brought to every role, making her characters memorable and iconic in the annals of horror history. Off-screen, Ingrid Pitt became a beloved figure at horror conventions and fan events. Her genuine love for the genre and her fans endeared her to a loyal following. It wasn't just about the roles she played, it was about the connection she forged with those who reveled in the thrill of a good horror tale. As the Queen of Horror, Ingrid Pitt's legacy lives on. Her impact on the genre transcends the screen, echoing through the corridors of cinematic history. In the darkened theaters of the past and the living rooms of devoted fans, Ingrid's presence endures, a testament to the enduring allure of horror and the woman who reigned as its beloved queen. She authored several books. Beyond the eerie glow of the silver screen, Ingrid Pitt ventured into the world of words, leaving her mark as not just the Queen of Horror on film, but also as a talented author. The same voice that sent shivers down spines now weaving tales on the pages of books. Ingrid's literary journey took flight with a series of books that reflected her deep passion for storytelling. Among her notable works is Life's a Scream, 1986, a memoir that peeled back the curtain on her life, offering readers a glimpse into the highs, lows, and thrills of her journey in the film industry. It wasn't just a recounting of her experiences, it was a narrative that mirrored the spirited, fearless woman behind the character she portrayed. In addition to her memoir, Ingrid explored the realms of fiction. Cuckoo Run in 1985 and The Bedside Companion for Vampire Lovers, 1973, co-authored with David J. Skal, showcased her versatility as a storyteller. The former, a suspenseful novel, demonstrated her ability to craft narratives that extended beyond the horror genre, while the latter delved into the lore and allure of vampires, a subject close to her heart. Ingrid Pitt wasn't content with merely entertaining, she aimed to share her love for the macabre and mysterious. Her books became a bridge between her and her fans, allowing them to delve deeper into the mind of the woman who had become an icon of horror. As an author, Ingrid's voice resonated with the same charisma that made her a beloved figure on screen. Her words painted vivid landscapes of terror, romance, and suspense, inviting readers to step into the realms she conjured with her pen.